Welcome to Nginx Mastery. Before we touch a single config file, we need to lock in what Nginx actually is, because once you see it clearly, everything else in this course falls into place. It's a small, event-driven C program, about 5 megabytes on disk, that listens on a port and does exactly one of 3 things with each request: serves a file, forwards it to a backend, or distributes it across many backends. That's the whole job. 3 roles, 1 binary, and over the next 12 slides, we're going to make each of those concrete. So here's the roadmap for this lesson. 4 mental models, and we're going to build them in order. First, the request lifecycle. What actually happens between the browser sending get, / and getting bytes back. Second, the 3 roles in real depth: serve, forward, distribute, because the plumbing is identical, only the last step changes. Third, where Nginx sits in the 6-layer stack, because it can play more than one position. And fourth, the honest list of cases where you should reach for something else. Get these 4 locked in, and by lesson 3, config anatomy will feel obvious instead of arbitrary. Let's start with picture number 3, where Nginx actually lives. A request passes through 6 layers: browser, CDN, load balancer, proxy, app server, database. Nginx commonly occupies 2 of those spots: position 3 as the front door load balancer, and position 4 as a per-server gate sitting right next to your app, terminating SSL and forwarding locally. And in serious production setups, you'll see both at once, Nginx in front of Nginx. Knowing which slot you're in tells you which features matter and which problems aren't yours to solve. Now let's zoom into role 1, the web server. This is Nginx at its most boring and most powerful. A browser asks for style.css, Nginx looks at its config, sees the root directive pointing at var www.html, reads the file off disk, and streams the bytes back. No code ran. Nothing was queried. Roughly 1 millisecond end-to-end. Most of the static content on the internet is served exactly this way, and we'll go deep on it in lesson 6. Role 2 is the reverse proxy, and this is where most modern setups actually live. Your Node app is happily listening on port 3000, but the public internet wants port 80 or 443. Nginx sits in the middle. A request comes in for API users, the location block matches, proxy pass opens a fresh connection to localhost 3000, and Nginx adds headers like xrealIP so your app still knows who the original client was. Node answers, Nginx hands the bytes back to the browser. The whole round trip, maybe 5 milliseconds. Role 3 is the load balancer, and mechanically it's almost identical to what we just saw, except instead of pointing proxy pass at a single address, you point it at a named pool. Define an upstream block with 3 servers, reference it from your location, and Nginx starts spreading requests across them. Default strategy is round robin. Request 1 goes to A, 2 to B, 3 to C, then it wraps. Add max bot fails and fail timeout, and Nginx will quietly evict a sick backend until it recovers. Lesson 9 gets into the smarter strategies: least connections, IP hash, weighted pools, but the mechanism is just this. Now, before you start reaching for Nginx on every project, let's flip the script. Here are 5 cases where it's the wrong answer. Pure static site? GitHub pages or Cloudflare pages do it for free, no server to patch. Inside Kubernetes, use a real ingress controller like Traefik. It's built for that world. Serverless apps already have API gateway in front. If DDoS protection is your main concern, an edge service like Cloudflare belongs out front. And for thousands of long-lived WebSockets, Proxy or Envoy handle it more gracefully. Knowing when not to use a tool is half of mastering it. So why does one tool credibly do 3 jobs at once? It comes down to 3 principles. First, all 3 roles are the same shape underneath. Receive an HTTP request, decide where the bytes go, stream them. Only the decision changes. 90% of the code is shared. Second, the event loop. One worker process, an epoll or queue loop, thousands of in-flight requests. That's why a $5 VM can hold 10,000 connections. And third, composability beats specialization. You could run Caddy, Envoy, and her proxy side by side, but that's 3 configs, 3 rotations, 3 sets of bugs. One mature tool your team actually knows usually wins at small and medium scale. With the theory grounded, here's the practical lookup. Find your situation in the left column, and you'll see exactly which roles to combine. Notice the pattern. Pure single-role apps are rare. A static site is just a web server, sure, but the moment you add WordPress and SPA or HTTPS, you're already stacking 2 roles. And a multi-tenant SaaS pulls in all 3. So when someone asks what Nginx is doing in your stack, point at the row, name the roles. That's the answer. Now stop watching and do the work. 3 short drills, about 45 minutes total, and they all point at the same thing. Your application, not a generic one. Diagram your stack the way slide 3 laid it out, mark where Nginx goes, then revisit the decision table and pick your roles. And finally, be honest with the not list. If Nginx isn't right for you, better to find out now than 6 months in. Before we close, 5 mental models to dismantle, because each one quietly breaks something later. Nginx does not run your app, it forwards bytes to it. Roots usually live in your application, not in Nginx. Reload is graceful, restart is not. Default to reload. More workers past your CPU count just adds context switching, so leave it on auto. And Nginx isn't only for big sites. A $5 VM serving 10,000 requests per second is exactly where you should learn it. And that's lesson 1. You now know the 3 roles, where Nginx sits in the stack, the cases where it's the wrong tool, and the traps that trip people up months in. That foundation is the whole point. Everything from here gets easier because you're not guessing what the box is doing. Next up, lesson 2. We install it, start it, and pull our first 200 OK. See you there.